Greetings to everyone. As we read the book of Job, this is a brief summary of the entire book, helping listeners understand its message in just a few minutes. The book of Job stands as one of the most profound and poetic writings in the Bible, wrestling with one of life's deepest questions: why do the righteous suffer? Set in an ancient patriarchal context, possibly around the time of Abraham, the story unfolds in the land of Uz, where Job is introduced as a man of integrity, wealth, and deep reverence for God. Unlike many other biblical books, Job is not rooted in Israel's history, but speaks to universal human experience. The book has a strong thematic connection with Genesis. In Genesis, we see the entrance of sin into the world, bringing suffering and brokenness. Job takes this reality further by exploring how suffering operates even in the life of a righteous person. Just as Satan appears in Genesis as a deceiver, here he appears as an accuser, challenging the authenticity of human faith. Thus, Job becomes a living test case in the cosmic question: is faith genuine, or is it dependent on blessings? The narrative begins dramatically. Job loses everything: his wealth, his children, and eventually his health. Yet, instead of turning away from God, he holds on to his faith, though not without deep emotional struggle. The central portion of this book, chapters 3 to 31, is a series of intense dialogues between Job and his friends, who insist that suffering must be a result of sin. Job, however, maintains his innocence and wrestles honestly with God's silence. This tension forms the heart of the book. A turning point comes from Elihu's speech, chapter 32 to 37, where suffering is presented not as merely as a punishment, but as a possible means of correction and spiritual growth. Then, in a powerful climax, chapter 38 to 41, God Himself speaks, not by explaining the reason for Job's suffering, but by revealing His own greatness as a creator and sustainer of the universe. Faced with this revelation, Job moves from questioning to humility. The book concludes with Job's restoration, but more importantly, with a deeper understanding of God. Spiritually, the book of Job teaches that God's ways are beyond human comprehension. It challenges the simplistic belief that good people always prosper and bad people always suffer. Instead, it reveals a God who is sovereign, wise, and deeply involved in His creation. Even when He seems silent, the greatest transformation in Job's life is not the restoration of his wealth, but his encounter with God, moving from hearing about God to truly knowing Him. In today's world, the message of Job remains deeply relevant. We live in a time filled with uncertainty, suffering, and unanswered questions. Like Job, many struggle to understand why pain exists, despite faithfulness. This book reminds us that faith is not built on receiving answers, but on trusting God's character. It calls modern believers to move beyond a transactional relationship with God and embrace a deeper, more resilient faith. It also warns against judging others' suffering and encourages compassion instead of judgment. In conclusion, the book of Job is not just about suffering, it is about truth, humility, and the mystery of God. It invites us to surrender our needs for explanations and to rest in the assurance that God is in control. When life does not make sense, Job teaches us that God knows everything, and He knows the most important things, and He understands our circumstances. May God bless you all. Amen.